green flag has been displayed and the race is underway. Tight corners going down the backstretch into a series of S-corners known as Madness right there. That corner has a nice bank on it, but with the new surface here at Mid-Ohio this year, the drivers can't really use the banking that much. They actually go through about 4 or 5 S-corners. You see the field beginning to fall into single file. There is one other straightaway on this racetrack in addition to the backstretch and the front stretch, which we've already described. There is Andretti out front going through Madness. There's also a jump in there. This is actually a 16-turn racetrack. Some will call it 14. And Steve Chassis is already off course, as is John Morton. Steve Chassis getting in trouble with one of his former rides, and Chassis looks like he's stalled. He's waving to the safety crewman. He's asking for help. Chassis in the Genesee beer wagon is the first victim of an incident here on the road course at Mid-Ohio.
I know Steve's had some trouble on the road courses this year, Larry, and he's not a road course racer by definition, but he's given it a good try, and he's done pretty well up until this point. I think his best finish was a 5th at Watkins Glen, his best road race finish, and we feel sorry to see Steve off it so early in the race.
Mario Andretti, the Newman Haas Budweiser Lola, that chassis that has been so successful in recent weeks on the IndyCar trail. Not only have they been fastest qualifiers on a regular basis, Andretti, remember, is undefeated in road course qualifying runs this year, but the chassis has also been winning. That's the race car chassis, not the Steve chassis we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. Mario Andretti and Danny Sullivan have combined for 5 wins in a row, and 6 of the last 7 races that chassis has come to victory lane first.
You know, Larry, anytime that Mario's near the front row, he hates to miss not leading the first lap or leading into the first turn, and today is no exception.
John Morton, who was involved in that incident with Steve Chassis on lap number 1, actually about the first half of this race, first half lap of this race, has pulled into the pit area. We have not seen Steve Chassis come around yet. There is John Morton, the Bob and Kathy Soltos Jet Engineering race car. John, one of the California drivers. Many people come out of the sunshine golden state of California to come to automobile racing here in the Midwest. And of course, many of them have been successful in graduating up to really the pinnacle of open wheel racing in America, Indianapolis type car racing. That little curve there in the top of the screen, that's the chicane leading right into the keyhole. Here is Ed Pym. Now, we mentioned Ed earlier. Ed started at the very tail of this pack in 28th position. However, he was the 9th fastest qualifier. You see Pym making his way through the field, moving around some of the other slower cars in the back. Pym was the 9th fastest qualifier here this weekend when we qualified on Friday. Yesterday, in a heavy rainstorm, he and his team manager and car owner Dan Gurney went out to do some practicing. And they made an adjustment on the rear wing, which was illegal. There was an extra tab on the wing, was giving him a little more downforce. But the point was, it was heavy rain, and Dan Gurney felt as though that the session should have been interpreted just as a testing session and not necessarily an official qualifying or practice run. There wasn't a disagreement with officials, but the rule book stood. And the fact of the matter was, the car was illegal by the rule book standards, and even though we had the unusual circumstances of the heavy rain, and Gurney contended they were not trying to improve their position in the qualifying run, the time was disallowed in the car to that point in the weekend disqualified. But he was added to the field on the end as a promoter's option. Ed Pym, 9th fastest and trying to move to the front. There you see him working on Dick Ferguson, one of the few Eagles that have qualified for the race here this weekend. Steve Chassis has pulled into the pit area. You can see it was a quick stop. They checked the suspension and the wheels, and Gary Lee was there. Gary?
Indeed, they checked only the suspension components and the tires, no flat spots. On the radio, Steve said that John Morton had run into him and knocked him off course. The car apparently is okay, and Chassis is back in the fray.
So far, this is beginning to look like a carbon copy of recent races. There we're looking at Pete Halsmer, who qualified in the top 10 here this week, and he continues to run in the top 10. An instant replay of the last few races because Andretti and a Lola continues to lead this race. We'll be back to see if he can hold on. The green and white car going into Madness on the inside. That is Corrado Fabi, the brother of Teo Fabi, who won this race a year ago. In an almost of an honoring of a contract that was supposed to take place next year, Corrado Fabi has jumped into the Forsythe Skoal Bandit. He qualified in the 7th row here this weekend, and right now he runs in 16th position right in front of Gordy Johncock and Jose Garza. Teo Fabi did fly across the Atlantic from his Formula One duties and is here watching his brother perform this weekend. You know,
Larry, I know that the Forsythe crew want to say hello to Kevin Cogan this weekend. He's in the hospital recovering from his injuries at Pocono a few weeks ago.
Corrado Fabi, his first ever American appearance, and Jerry Forsythe was telling me earlier this weekend that Corrado was very happy and excited about having this ride here in America in an Indianapolis car. Corrado Fabi was brought English Leather as one of the associate sponsors to this particular team. Obviously an experienced road racer. He's been running the Formula One circuit as a substitute driver for his brother Teo for this year. Corrado's best finish on the Formula One circuit ironically happened here in the States at Dallas when he finished 7th driving the Brabham car. But Corrado Fabi runs 16th right now. That's 16th, 17th, and 18th. Johncock following Corrado Fabi. And there's Bobby Rahal. Chip, I would imagine if you talked to a lot of competitors before this race began, a lot would say this guy has got to be one of the real favorites here at Mid-Ohio.
Without a doubt, their team does all their testing here at Mid-Ohio. His car owner, Jim Truman, is also the owner of Mid-Ohio. And I'll tell you, although Bobby is apparently out of contention at the moment, I wouldn't count him out before the end of the race.
Well, fuel so often has been a factor in these IndyCar races, as it has been in Grand National stock car races, and fuel has been a problem for the Jim Truman Red Roof Inns team in this number 5 car of Bobby Rahal. This is their home track. If you pull outside the track, you'll see a sign that says 70 miles to Cleveland and 70 miles to Columbus, Ohio. We're midway between those two cities, and Bobby Rahal was born about 50 or 60 miles north of here, and now he lives in Columbus. So you can see that this is definitely Bobby Rahal's home track. There is Pete Halsmer, the Frank Arciero Levi number 11. Halsmer had a minor collision with John Paul Jr. earlier in the race. We had a report that the engine was off on the racetrack, so apparently Pete Halsmer has had a problem in the engine compartment. And this team that has struggled so hard in 1984 looks like they're having problems again. Now we're getting a report that it may be a spark box problem. But once again, a tough blow for Pete Halsmer, who finished 2nd in an IndyCar race on a road course a year ago. Meanwhile, there's Bobby Rahal running comfortably. He's logged thousands of test miles on this racetrack, and believe you me, I got a feeling, Chip, they know exactly where they are in terms of this fuel consumption race and how fast they should be going right now.
Exactly, and I know Bobby was, although he's not up there with Mario right now, this is one of the first races that he wasn't on the pole this race, and this is one of his first professional races at Mid-Ohio here that he hasn't sat on the pole.
Mario Andretti continues to set the pace. Andretti is not only undefeated in road course qualifying for 1984 season, but he still stands as the only active Indianapolis car driver to a set fast time on radial tires. They debuted radial tires a couple months ago in this division, and Andretti has been the fastest man on those tires ever since they debuted. There you saw the interval between 1st and 2nd place. Bobby Rahal coming through the chicane. That's turn number 2 on this track. Turn number 3, this is the keyhole. This is the tightest hairpin on the racetrack. You come out of the keyhole, the car has a tendency to slide to the outside of the racetrack. It's reverse camber. Now you are on the inside of the racetrack, darting down the long backstretch, 160, 165, 170, almost 180 miles an hour. And meanwhile, about 2 football fields ahead, there is Mario Andretti.
He really has that Lola working today, Larry, as he goes up into the chute area of the circuit. The Lola comes down, and the car looks very neutral in respect. The front wheels are adhering just as much as the rear wheels. Anytime the car slides, it's in a neutral position, not the front or the rear moving first. The car looks super on the track today. Mario, I think Bobby's starting to run him down, though.
See if you can get Alan. Mario Andretti on that last lap, you may have caught a quick glimpse. As we look now at Al Unser, I was about to say you may have caught a quick glimpse of Mario darting off the course just a second, getting those outside tires off. There's the number 59 car of Peter Kuhn. Peter Kuhn is like Corrado Fabi in his first ever Indianapolis car race here today. This is the car that we have seen a number of drivers in throughout the 1984 season. But Peter, a Super V champion from the past, a man who once won 4 Super V races in a row, has got his first Indy ride today.
Peter's been looking for a good IndyCar ride for a few years now, and I think he finally has got his foot in the door here. And I look to see good things out of him today if he finishes the race, Larry.
Chip, you know, the interesting thing about Peter is that he always seems to be better in the race than he is in qualifying. And right now, he has got the heat turned up on Dick Simon. He makes a move going into the right-hander, and Peter Kuhn definitely is beginning to move up. Well, as we mentioned, Peter's in his first ever IndyCar race. It's a day that he has looked forward to for a long, long time. Our Gary Lee checked with Peter about his feelings regarding his first ever Indianapolis car race.
Do you have one word that describes your feelings going into your first IndyCar race? Is it fear, anticipation, and trepidation? Is there one?
I think it's elated is probably the word for it. Frankly, I'm excited as hell. It's really a real big, chance for me to show people my stuff, if you will, and I'm just looking forward to doing it.
Well, Peter has improved his position. He started back in the number 23rd slot, and we have him, the graphic says 22nd. We've got him about 20th position right now in the AGFA number 59 race car. This car has been on the circuit for most of the year. It's a car and team that has struggled really to get into the races, but I would imagine they're a little excited about their opportunity and their chances here today.
Peter's more than qualified as a driver for that car, and he's done very well in his Super V here at Mid-Ohio. I look to see good things out of him today.
Chip, you've been in both a Super V and an Indianapolis car within the last 4 years. Is that application from a Super V to an Indy car direct? Is it that big of an advantage to have driven them last before coming to Indy cars?
I think it is, Larry, because the mini Indy cars, or Super Vs as you call them, they have the same aerodynamics as Indy cars. They have front wings, they have rear wings, they have ground effects, and other than the pit stops, I would say it's a very good indication of what IndyCar racing would be like to be in the Super Vs.
You're looking at the bright red yellow Pennzoil of Rick Mears. Rick Mears right now runs in third position. He's got a little bit of distance between himself and the fourth running Danny Sullivan, who just keeps creeping into the picture every once in a while. One of Mears' finest qualifying runs of the 1984 season. He was second on the grid to that fast Lola of Mario Andretti. Mears qualified at better than 102 miles per hour. Incidentally, Andretti was a full 2 miles per hour, almost 3 miles per hour faster than the entirety of the rest of the field. But Rick Mears was the best of everybody else outside of Mario, and he runs in third position right now. Ray Hall outsnookered him on the first couple of laps of this race, but Mears is holding on.
I know Sullivan was looking at the back of Rick Mears' car a few weeks ago at the Pocono 500, and he managed to get around him. I'm sure the same thoughts are going through Sullivan's head right now as he sees Rick just in front of him.
You see them put a lap on Herm Johnson, the man who used to be a painter, and a very artistic painter at that. The next time you're at an Indianapolis car race, check out Herm Johnson's helmet. It's one of the most spectacular on the field. You see the graphic, 10 laps completed here. The race will go 84 laps, and if you're wondering about pit stops, they should start coming up after lap number 25. And the number to keep in mind, Chip, on the pit stops as far as fuel consumption goes is 28. You don't make 28 laps, you could be in trouble.
Well, anytime, if you don't make 28 laps, that means you're getting less than 1.8 miles to the gallon. If you're getting less than 1.8 miles to the gallon, you're going to have to do it on 3 stops.
Well, the man who will be watching this with an eagle eye is our Gary Lee. Gary?
Larry, to touch on that, Jim Truman, the owner of Bobby Rahall's car, says they're going to try to go to lap 30 before they make their stop. However, the Budweiser crew of Andretti says about lap 25, but he'll stay out as long as possible.
Well, obviously, if they pit on lap 25, that means they anticipate getting better than that gauge that you have to have, that 1.8 miles per gallon. 28, lap number 28 is the point. That is 1/3 of the way through the race. And if you can get that far, theoretically at least, as long as things don't change for the rest of the race, Chip, you stop once more on lap 56, and then you're home free.
That should be it. And I'll tell you, if somebody can wait till lap 30, they're getting over 2 miles to the gallon in these cars, and that is a lot.
It's beginning to heat up for second, third, and fourth. There is Rick Mears, Danny Sullivan. Right behind them, Derek Daly, Emerson Fittipaldi, Al Unser Jr., and Michael Andretti. And Al Unser Jr. has made quite a climb to the top. He was running in 8th position after lap number 1, and now he has closed in on the first 6 cars, at least 2nd through 6th. As we look at Danny Sullivan has had his first 2 wins ever in his Indianapolis car career here in the 1984 season, and one of those Lolas.
You know, Larry, when the cars are running close like this, what's interesting is they tend to run a lot hotter, especially on a road course like this where you don't get as much air as when you're on one of the high-speed ovals. When the cars are bunched up like you see Mears and Sullivan here, a group of cars behind them, it could mean overheating for the engine.
Sullivan makes his move, going into madness. That banked right-hander, and Sullivan slips underneath. Danny Sullivan takes over the number 3 position. So now it's Lola, march of Ray Hall, Lola, and then march of Rick Mears. Danny Sullivan begins to make his move as you see the car rock back and forth as it goes right and left through that series of S's. at the north end of the racetrack. There is a straightaway down there. There's a north stretch that has a couple of kinks in it. Right now, they're still in a series of S's as they come out under the Budweiser Bridge. There is the final straightaway that leads to the carousel, the last corner on this racetrack. We are at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course near Mansfield, Ohio. We're in the middle of the triangle of Cleveland, Toledo, and Columbus, Ohio. And today's race is the first of 5 in a row on ESPN. 5 Indianapolis car races. The next one will be the Cart Molson Indy. It'll be aired Sunday, September the 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time from the San Air Speedway outside of Montreal, the San Air Superspeedway. It's a mile race course. The Indy cars have already tested there, and the speeds have been well over 140 miles an hour. So it's fast, even though it's a short oval, Chip.
It is, Larry, and we do want to mention that Pete Halsmer has re-entered the track, and his car does sound good. It doesn't sound like it had that miss like it did earlier, and Pete driving, of course, that Frank Arciero march.
Well, except for one minor moment, which we happened to catch on live television here for Mario Andretti when he slipped off the racetrack. He has been on the racetrack since the green flag dropped, not only been on the track, but on the gas. And Andretti, at least to this point, is knocking him dead again. Mario Andretti, certainly one of the world's most famous race drivers, is having one of his finest IndyCar seasons ever. He has a very comfortable lead, and I think most would agree that if this guy can go the race without any problems, he certainly will be the one to beat. Chip, you and I talked before the broadcast. It looked like Andretti and Rahaal's experience here. What would you be doing if you were Mario Andretti right now? Looking to get off the pace?
No, I don't think I would be, Larry. I'd be trying to be building up as much of a lead as I could. You can never slow up this early in the race. You want to build up as much a lead as you can. You never know what's going to happen. Anything can happen once those cars start to come into the pits. Once our pit stops begin, anything can happen. You can stall the car in the pits. You can run low on fuel. Right now, Mario's team has no idea what his fuel mileage is. They won't know his fuel mileage until the first pit stop.
There are 6 races remaining on the schedule. Andretti is in the thick of the points race, and Gary Lee has a comment.
Well, Steve Chassie is standing by right now, not because he wants to be, but because of an early race altercation. What happened out there, Steve?
Well, it was a first lap deal where everyone was scrambling for a spot, and we went down the back stretch and went through a couple of turns and got into, I think it's turn 5, the off-camber left hand. And at the bottom of the hill, I had the line entering the corner, and just as I turned in, out of my peripheral vision in my right eye, I saw John Morton coming right at me with the tires were locked up, and he was trying to turn right as best he could, but he slid down far enough that his left front and my right rear got tangled up, and the car jumped up in the air, and I have a feeling that that broke a radiator or a oil cooler or something because the temperatures went sky high.
So an early afternoon for Steve Chassie.
You can see Steve is also showing the signs of the heat here today. In one respect, it's a minor advantage for Steve Chassie. He will be leaving immediately now, flying to DuQuoin, Illinois to participate in the USAC Silver Crown race, the dirt cars there, as we take a look at Howdy Holmes. Unser Jr. also leading this pack through the chicane. That's turn number 2. There's Jose Garza, a man who has run very well on road courses. Tom Stephen, the man who won the 1983 Indianapolis 500-mile race and the current PPG IndyCar World Series points leader. Garza, then Tom Steva coming out of the keyhole. That's that hairpin again. You saw Corrado Fabi's nose up there. These guys are running back between 10th and 15th position right now. Matter of fact, data speed is showing Jose at 15th, so they're between 15th and 20th, as we still have 19 cars on the lead lap, with Andretti having about a 15-second advantage over second place Bobby Rahal.
You know, Jose Garza, Larry, is quite an established road racer. I'm surprised he's so far back in the pack this week in his Schaefer Machinist March. I think Jose was unhappy with his performance in qualifying, and I'm sure he wants to be up at the front near the end.
We also have a report as we watch Jose Garza that the kart officials are observing the number 45 car of Dale Coyne. Dale, another one of the young drivers struggling to make a name for himself in IndyCar racing. He's in a 1982 Eagle with a Chevy Power, and we are told that the kart officials are observing that car, perhaps something leaking from it. There's Jose Garza, the young Mexican who so electrified the Indianapolis crowd a few years ago when he was a rookie on the trail. It's really been a struggle for Jose since then. A lot of people thought that he was certainly one of the next big stars in this type of racing. It came so easy the first year he was in the league.
I'll tell you, you can't say his problems have been from a lack of of drying, Gary, Jose is quite a trier. And even if you can just see him here, car is sliding, slipping, sliding. He's driving it very, very hard.
Jose Garza trying to make the most out of a situation that he is in here today. They have been basically satisfied with the performance of that team this year, but of course the idea is to try and get as close to the front as you possibly can. That is Al Hobart. I think I may have called that Al Unser Sr. a couple minutes ago. That's Al Hobart in the CRC Chemicals car, and then Howdy Holmes following them, and Garza trying to turn the wick up on those two guys. Experienced road racers all here, so this is a real study in road racing techniques. The average speed of the race up to this point better than 101 miles per hour, and that is faster than more than half the field qualified. 101.36, and that as a qualifying speed would have put you in 9th starting position. So Chip Andretti, you might say, is burying him them up to this point.
He is really burying them, and I'm sure what he's doing is trying to get out to as big a lead as possible before that first pit stop. Getting back to Al Hobart, he's quite an established racer, and I'll tell you, more than once this year, he's driven in 2 races on one weekend, Larry. He's a private pilot, and he's flown his own plane between 2 racetracks, qualified 2 cars, and raced 2 cars on the same weekend. I know once was in that broadcast, an ESPN broadcast at Cleveland, where he was going back and forth to Watkins Glen all weekend.
Well, Hobart's best finish has been a 4th in this year's Indianapolis 500. That's his high watermark for the 1984 season, although he was 5th at the Meadowlands in the rain and also 7th at Cleveland. A man who also has a lot of miles on this racetrack, and that is always a tremendous advantage. Unless you've driven race cars, you just can't get a grasp of how much of an advantage it is to have experience on a particular speedway or road course. And on a road course, I think it's a little more of an advantage than even on a speedway, because there are so many little tiny places on a road course where you can pick up just a little bit more momentum, and that really is the name of the game, is keeping the momentum up.
Being a road racer, Larry, I can't say that I agree with you a whole lot. I think oval track drivers find the oval tracks, there are little nooks and crannies there that they all find, believe me.
Particularly at Pocono, right?
Exactly.
Nooks and crannies and valleys. Al Hobart continues to run up in the top 20. He has held on to the lead lap to this point. The keyhole is one of the real tricky places on this racetrack. And Chip, what about the keyhole? How do you get through there?
After the start-finish line, you go through the left-hand turn and approach the keyhole area of the track. The keyhole is the most important area of the circuit because it leads on to the longest straightaway. You're entering the keyhole in 4th gear. You approach it. It's a right-hand turn. You downshift to 3rd gear and then to 2nd again. Once you're in the middle of the turn, your car wants to drift to the outside, but you have to hug the inside. Keep that car down at the apex. If it starts to go toward the exit, you're drifting to the outside of the track. You grab 3rd gear and you're on the straightaway. Away you go.
The story so far has been red, white numeral 3, Andretti, and that says it all. Pit stops will be coming up in less than 10 laps, and that's where the real drama of any race always begins to unfold. We'll be back with that. This is Mario Andretti coming down the long backstretch. You know, when you watch a race on television, if it's an oval, it's pretty easy to dial into where the corners are. They're very distinct and succinct. There's turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and turn 4. But on a road course, some of the cameras on the inside, some of the cameras on the outside, and it's a little difficult to get a hold of it. As we watch Andretti come around, he's about halfway around on this particular lap here, more than 21, 22 laps now complete. The next lap around, we're going to have Chip take you on a lap around the Meadowhall Sports Car Course. It's 2.4 miles. There are 4 left-hander corners here and 12 right-hand turns. There are 3 straightaways, and as the field comes down the front stretch this time, we'll pick up on the leader who's just getting ready to lap Gordon Johncock. This is the final set of corners. It's known as the carousel that they are entering in just a second here. Turn 15, turn 16. Here they come down the front stretch past the pits.
You know, Mario and Gordy are ex-teammates, and I know Mario said one time, Larry, that he never had a better teammate than Gordon Johncock. Johncock, of course, in the STP Special. Mario coming up, approaching the keyhole area, is a very fast section of the track, very hard to drive on. The car ends up on one side of the track, but you want to be on the other side. That's how the keyhole is, and it's one of the slowest parts of the track, and as I said earlier, very important because it leads on to the back straightaway. the back straightaway course, you're seeing speeds of 180 miles an hour.
You get to relax, right, at 180 miles an hour.
Believe it or not, at Mid-Ohio, that is a relaxing area because you're going on the straightaway. It gives you a chance to look at your gauges, look at your temperatures, look at your oil pressure, make sure everything, the car is working well. You don't have much time to do that once you enter these S's down here. In the S's, right where Mario is right now, the car gets very light, wants to slide to the outside of the track. Coming down, braking hard and shifting.
Well, we are going to go back to the pits and interrupt our description of the track here as one of the leaders, Al Unser, has pulled into the pits for what we believe to be the first of the routine pit stops, but it comes only on his lap number 21.
I think they're going to have trouble there, Larry, because it's only lap 22 or 21, and Al, I question whether he'll be able to go the distance on 2 stops here, go the 84-lap distance. I'm sure Roger Penske has a good idea now how much mileage they're getting.
Well, Chip, you know, he qualified 3rd quick, his finest qualifying run of the year on a road course. As we go back up front and look at Mario, again completing another pass by the start-finish line here. But he slipped back significantly. Maybe they felt their tire problems or setup problem was so bad they had to run the risk of stopping.
I'll tell you one thing, though. Tires, fuel, talk about what you want. Don't ever count out Al Unser. He's made a career of just being a steady, consistent driver and being there when the checkered flag falls, and I would not count him out today in the Miller Special.
Just again, a reminder, it's going to go 84 laps, and our estimate is that 28 laps, 2 laps either side of that mark, are when most of the pit stops should take place. A race for 6th and 7th position down the front stretch. The bright red number 40 carries the banners of Old Milwaukee, a name familiar to Chip Ganassi. This week, the pilot, Emerson Fittipaldi. That's how they pronounce it in his homeland, but here in the States, we call it Fittipaldi. And speaking of problems, Chip,
there's Al Unser off the track. Hard to believe, you know. He does not slide off too often. Apparently, I see something in the back there on the right rear tire. Might be flat, apparently. And there's John Paul Jr. also off the track. And he's back on and running again.
It looks like a little bit of damage to the front end. I think that was reported earlier, but John Paul may be operating with a race car that's not sticking to the racetrack because of the wing damage up front. And there is Al Unser just outside of the keyhole. Now, that close to a racing surface on a right-hand corner oftentimes would be a very dangerous situation, but here at the keyhole the speeds drop down to maybe 50 miles per hour, so that's not that dangerous of a position here at this racetrack. And there is Corrado Fabi coming in slow, but he is at the front end of the pits. He is in one of those pit areas that is very close to the entrance off the racetrack, so if it looked like he was going slower than most, that is a factor of where he is pitted.
Also, Larry, the reason is we find a lot of the drivers coming into kart from Europe, they're so used to coming in the pits slow in Formula One because the pits are so crowded in Formula One. They don't know how to quite make up time in the pits like the Americans have had years of practice at. That could be one of the reasons.
They got a problem because they're gesturing at Corrado. He speaks good English, so the English, or rather the lack of it, is not a problem, but there is something wrong with that race car. They're a little frustrated as to figuring out what to do. Mario Andretti continues to set the pace here at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. We're actually in a little community called Lexington, one of the most beautiful sections of the state of Ohio. There are actually 2 areas in Ohio where there are rolling hills that you might call somewhat of a fairyland as far as sightseeing goes. One is east of Columbus, Ohio, and this is the other one. And it's a nice area of the country and one of the best manicured racetracks I think I've ever seen, Chip, and maybe one of the finest looking facilities in the world.
It really is. You know, a few years ago, Jim Truman took this facility over. He's put up new garages, a new timing stand, a new tower.
Chip, our leaders coming into the pits will want to watch this one carefully. Mario Andretti comes in on lap number 25. Now, that's a little early, but if they're getting good mileage, it could be enough. So far, the stop looks very routine, and Gary Lee is standing by.
It is indeed the routine pit stop. They had planned to stop on lap 25. No change of rubber. They top off the 40 gallons of alcohol. A very fast stop. But let's see how much ground he's lost to second place.
Well, he was stopped for 15 seconds. That means it probably took him about 30 seconds by the time you add in the slowdown time and the speed up. Andretti comes out. It looks like he is still the man to beat. The first series of pit stops coming up. Stay with us. It could be exciting. There you see the top 5 finishers from the Escort Radar Warning 200 of a year ago. Teo Fabi, whose brother Corrado has just retired from this race with gearbox problems, won the event in that 33 car. Andretti was second. Ray Hall, whom you're looking at in the background, was third. Unser Jr. fourth, and Danny Ongaias, in one of his few trips to the road courses of America's IndyCar circuit, came home in 5th position. That's Bobby Rahal. This is his home course. The track is owned by the car owner Jim Truman, who incidentally participated in a celebrity race this morning here. Rahal has been very fast of recent. In the last 3 road course events, for instance, he has qualified 2, 2, and 3 in that France Weiss VDS engine. And in the last 5 races, every one of his qualifying runs has been in the top 5. Bobby Rahal certainly a top contender here today. Rahal is also the highest ranked driver in terms of points and dollars won among the non-finisher, or rather among the non-winners on the 1984 Kart PPG trail.
We see Danny Sullivan just snuck into the pits there.
There is Danny Sullivan, lap number 26. So as we indicated to you, between laps 26 and 30 is when most of the stops would occur. Something unusual going on, some adjustments being made to Danny around the collar there. You think, Chip, just a warm day and they're trying to get some more cool air in there?
That's a good question, Larry. I think it looked like he was having some sort of problem with the collar he wears to keep his neck upright during the race. I know Danny, driving that Domino's Pizza Team Shearson Lola, was in and out fairly quick, even though he looked like his crew chief was doing something with his neck collar brace there.
Yeah, the car's number is 30, and that has significance for the sponsor. It refers to 30-minute delivery, and it's also called the Domino's Pizza Hot One, and we do have a hot one here today. Perhaps not quite as warm as down in Darlington, South Carolina, where the Grand National Stock Cars competed on this same day, but the temperature here is 88 degrees. Now, there's a nice breeze for the spectators. All of the flags are standing erect, but for the drivers down inside the cockpit, when there's a wind outside, the only time you notice is when it blows you off the racetrack. Isn't that right, Chip?
That's right. I know we're coming up on lap 28 here. We might see some of the Patrick teams starting to do their pit stops here. And we see on the track there Sullivan driving that Lola, getting sideways down in the S's area of the circuit. I'm sure Danny is remembering his win a few weeks ago at Pocono, and he would sure like to repeat again here today, I'll tell you.
Danny Sullivan in the chute, one of the 3 straightaways on this race course. There's a front stretch that goes by the pits, also that long back stretch, and then that short chute that is actually right in the middle of a series of corners. Down at the north end of this racetrack, there are about 10 turns, right, left, right, left. The first one of those is called Madness. Danny has just come out of what is known as the Carousel, turns 15 and 16. Now he moves to the inside, coming down the front stretch, the home stretch, putting a lap on Dick Simon. Just some pit notes, and Sullivan sliding a little bit, coming out of turn number 2 that time. He sets up for the chicane. There is the Kentuckian in the upper right-hand side of your screen. A right-left flick of the wrist through the chicane, and now to the hard right-hander. Again, the slowest point on the racetrack. And now you sit back and hunker down and just tromp on that throttle and get as quickly as you can up to top speed. Danny Sullivan in 5 starts in the road course has 1 win.
You know, I think it's interesting, Larry. In the pit action we see here across from us, some of the teams change 1 tire, some change 2, some change 3, some change all 4.
Al Jr. is out on the course. We might also remind you as we watch Al Jr. coming around, he runs in 4th place. Bobby Rahal has pitted, so apparently none of those fuel problems that he has experienced so many times in the last couple of years. Rahal comes in on lap number 29, and there he is. The Red Roof Inns crew gets him out in fine position. Bobby Rahal, that's got to be a tremendous sigh of relief for Rahal. They've had fuel problems so many times, and here he is right on course for a change in the fuel consumption race.
You know, apparently Rahal must be getting better mileage than Mario. Rahal stayed out a few more laps than Mario did.
And he has the lead, I believe. Or is that Halsmer? No, I guess that's Pete Halsmer. Looked like the red 3, Chip.
It did, and I think 5 laps later, that might prove interesting at the end of the race. If in fact, Bobby Rahal and Mario Andretti are fighting it out for the lead, that our first pit stop could dictate the end of the race.
Well, most of the front runners have now completed without incident their first series of pit stops. Just some pit notes as we again watch Rahal moving into madness, going underneath Ed Pym, and we believe that is Pete Halsmer trailing that duo. The number 21 car of Al Hobart, the number 41 car of Howdy Holmes, apparently leaking something, being observed and watched carefully. Dick Ferguson has reported to his crew on the radio he has lost 2nd and 3rd gears, and the car will be retired. And I think we commented earlier, just to reconfirm, that the number 33 car of Corrado Favi, the man who came with brother Teo and sister Christina, also on hand this weekend. Teo and Christina flying across the Atlantic to watch Corrado race. They have retired from this race, and it'll be another day and another time for the young Italian. The Carousel. the final turns before coming uphill to the home stretch. Your rocket ship down a very short, less than a quarter of a mile front stretch past the pit area as we complete lap number 30 of 84. You get a quick glimpse at your crew member on the outside or right side of your race car with a signboard up there telling you either how fast you're going or what position you're in. And if you're Bobby Rahal, you know that you're running in second position. Gary Lee continues to roam the pit area up and down following all these stories. Gary, now that the first series of pit stops are over, you have a guest.
Well, actually, this is not a bad spot to watch the race from under the umbrella at the scoring table here in the
Gary, we have an
Skull-Banded
incident
pit
on the
area.
racetrack. Dick Simon with a serious
Where is
fire
it?
very close to the cockpit. Dick Simon pulling off the course. At this point, we cannot tell exactly where it is, but the flames were very close to the back shoulders of Dick Simon in car number 22. Dick is out in the series of S's. Dick Simon in the break-free special. It's another March race car. Remember that spectacular crash that Simon had at the Riverside International Raceway a couple of years ago on ESPN. That looks like, Chip, the first serious left-hander. It's uphill right after the first right-hander going into the Madness section.
You know, that's an interesting part of the track there, and as we saw, the kart crew was on the scene very quickly.
Tom Sneva getting a refreshment for himself and also a drink of fuel for the race car. Sneva got tremendous mileage, pitting for the first time on lap number 30. Tom Sneva going further than all of the other leaders. We will continue to watch that incident involving Dick Simon. The safety crew members were not moving around frantically, so I'm guessing, Chip, there was no driver injury involved there. Of course, the driver's inside the race car. There's the gadget on the inside that you can hit and fill the cockpit with foam. Also, of course, the fireproof suit. So I think Dick is probably okay.
Let's hope so, Larry. I think we, you know, looking back on these pit stops, I think we had a change of strategy here. Mario Andretti has usually stayed out the longest of all the drivers throughout every race this season. This is the first race I can remember him coming in so early. It's very unlike him to come in early on his first pit stop. He usually stays out the longest. Here we had Tom Sneva stay out the longest.
Word from the kart radios, Dick Simon A-OK. So good news from that incident up there in the S's. And there is Herm Johnson's mount being dismantled in the pit area. The Pace Electronics car that we have seen Chuck Siprich in earlier this year, as well as Graham McLay. Herm stays in the race car, so apparently they feel they've got a problem that they can fix. There is Michael Andretti in the blue and yellow number 99. Earlier in this year, Michael Andretti and the Crico people, they were thinking championship. They started this year out with a house of fire. Andretti finishing 10th, 3rd, 5th, and 4th in the first 4 races, and that included the Indianapolis 500. He expected to do very well as his father, Mario Andretti, zips by on the high side. With each passing week, Michael's hopes for a championship continues to slip further and further back. There is Mario Andretti, the leader, going by. We're going to show you the interval between first and second. You just saw Roberto Guerrero go by, and here comes the second running Bobby Rahal. It's about a 10-second difference as we look up through or up past the keyhole into the chicane. 10 seconds between first and second, Andretti and Rahal as the number 45, the two-tone green and white car of Dale Coyne, the Plainfield, Illinois driver who is qualified for an Indianapolis car race here this year in a 2-year-old Chevy. Quite an accomplishment in itself.
I'll tell you, Larry, it'll be interesting to see. I saw Michael Andretti move over and let his father go right by. We'll see how cordial he is when Bobby Rahal comes up on him about to put a lap on him, see if he does the same thing with Bobby.
Well, for Mario Andretti, and for everybody for that matter, it's been a very uneventful race with the one exception of Dick Simon's fire, which apparently was a fuel line fire. That's just a guess, or maybe something near the pop-off valve. There was a lot of flame just to the back of Dick's neck, but the driver was able to escape without any injuries. But that's been the only incident of the race, and Mario Andretti has made it look easy in this bright red Bud number 3. There is the long backstretch up to 180 miles an hour. Rick Mears, who qualified so well here this weekend, right now runs in the number 5 position. He's about 58 seconds, almost a minute behind the leader, Mario Andretti, and right behind Mears, just a few tenths of a second ticks, that is, behind Rick, is the international star, Brazil's Emerson Fittipaldi.
Although Rick started up in the front row there, Larry, he's dropped back a little bit, but once again on the Penske team, I wouldn't count him out as Fittipaldi's closing in.
Chip, more road course races than not have turned out to be not exactly endurance contests, but almost chess matches. We have seen so much happen with this fuel situation. Driver fatigue to a minor degree begins to figure in. Chassis fatigue on the race cars. A lot of things can happen. And I think over the last 3 years on the road races that we have been covering on ESPN, we've seen Rick Mears and Roger Penske win more using their heads rather than Rick's right foot than anybody.
Without a doubt. That's been the Penske trademark over the years. And Rick Mears is especially good at being in the car and being able to tell when to really turn on the speed, when to lay low and wait for an opportunity. Rick has much experience in the desert racing and the off-road racing, and I think that's where he got that experience as we see him try to go by John Paul here and Jose Legarza.
Rick in heavy traffic as they enter Madness. He gets underneath Jose Legarza. He'll now go to work on John Paul. He would have liked to have gone high going through Madness and gotten around both of them, but they were too abreast going down the backstretch. So Rick, there you see him, will have to set up John Paul on his own now as they work left, now right. They're going to go back left over a little bit of a hill, and there's a jump right there, and it's quite a thrill when you're behind the wheel of a race car when you come up from underneath that tunnel. Rick Mears, a 3-time car PPG Series champion.
You know, once again, Larry, that's why the drivers cannot afford to take it easy at any time, really. Once you're off of that back straightaway in the S's section of the track, in the chute, all the way up past the carousel, until you get back to the front straightaway, you can't pass. That is why you cannot afford to relax or to slow down. You never know when you're going to get in traffic, get behind somebody. It's Mid-Ohio. It's very narrow in certain spots and very hard to pass.
Well, Chip, Bobby Rahal tells me that it's at least 2 abreast all the way around, that there's at least 2 abreast in the carousel. You can pass anywhere on the racetrack unless the guy in front of you doesn't want you to.
That's exactly right.
And I've not known too many race drivers who did not want to hold the guy behind him back.
Exactly.
We're watching Rick Mears. Rick Mears continues to motor in 5th position. Remember, the leader, Mario Andretti, has about a minute advantage on him. Rick is now going to work on John Paul, who incidentally is 1 lap down and runs in 14th position. John has made his pit stop. We have completed 38 of 84 laps, so we are coming up to the halfway point. That'll be at lap 42, of course, in this 200-mile race. And Rick Mears, maybe he's biding his time. Maybe he's struggling. You don't really know at this point. You never know what's going on in the brain trust there in the Pennzoil Z7 Specials crew. They have been in control of so many races, and the rest of the drivers and crews weren't even aware of it in a couple of instances. But I have a feeling that with the performance of the Lolas so far this year, with Andretti and Sullivan near the front, I have a feeling they're the ones in control. Rick Mears continues to trail our leader, Mario Andretti. We are approaching the halfway point in the race, and we'll be back after this. Mario Andretti at about the halfway point in this race, now completing lap number 40. Actually, 2 laps to go before we're halfway through. 41 laps down now, I stand corrected, as he completes another lap as he streams down the front stretch. Jose Legarza is trailing Mario. Mario has just put another lap on him, and Andretti just continues to make everybody else look not only at his heels but also in their mirrors, because he's lapping just about everybody in the field. Only 7 cars now remain on the lead lap. Mario plus 6 others. Gary Lee down in the pits has been monitoring the situation, also watching the fuel. He's just gone through the first series of pit stops. And Gary, what are your thoughts at this moment?
Well, first of all, on Mario, it was interesting to note that all season long, as these drivers make their pit stops, they take on some type of liquid refreshment. However, Andretti has not taken 1 drink during a pit stop this season. Obviously very calm, cool, and collected in the cockpit. Also, you were talking about John Paul Jr., the car perhaps not handling because of that missing right front stabilizer bar. We talked with Paul Diatlovich, the chief mechanic on the California Cooler March. He said actually right now his driver John Paul is racing faster than he did when he qualified. So apparently the car is handling okay. Chip, a question for you. For the layman at home, exactly what does that front stabilizer bar do?
Well, the front stabilizer bar, Gary, keeps the front end of the car from rolling. In other words, keeps the car level at all times. In other words, what the left side of the car does, the right side does because of that stabilizer bar.
There was a final practice session yesterday afternoon, and several people, including John Paul Jr., made significant gains in terms of their on-track speed. Derek Daly was the fastest one yesterday. Jose Garza, incidentally, has pulled into the pits as we talk about Derek Daly. Daly was the fastest one yesterday and has been able to hold on to the lead lap. There is Jose Garza coming in to make a pit stop on lap number 41, which is really out of sync from just about everything we would have predicted before the race began. I think Jose has sensed some type of problem with the machine. It's a long, slow pit stop, a lot of conversation, and when there's a lot of talk like that, Chip, it's seldom routine.
Very seldom routine like that. He didn't even take on fuel there. What happened? Jose's had a rough weekend. He crashed in practice, took off the front end of the car. He was thwarted, of course, in qualifying by the race of rain we've had. It's been a tough weekend for him.
Well, there's John Paul Jr. You can see the damage to the front of the car, a tire mark on the nose, the right front wing and stabilizer missing. And John Paul, he has only been in 4 races this year so far, wandering around looking for a ride. He's been successful in recent months. He has been on in one road course race prior to this. Matter of fact, he did quite well when he performed at Elkhart Lake. And at the top of the screen, you can see a couple of cars coming very close together that time in the background as we watch John Paul Jr. and Scott Dixon work their way through the chicane. Actually there to slow the cars down to set them up for the keyhole. This racetrack would be incredibly fast on that particular section of the racetrack if it were not for that chicane. But you have to back out of the throttle a little bit. I don't think you touch the brakes going through there, do you, Chip? You just get out of it.
You don't touch the brakes, Larry, but what's interesting is it's flat and it's very hard to see the turns up there. The asphalt is flat. There are no trees or pylons or any type of marker as you go up through the chicane there. It's a hard thing to spot when you're approaching it at over 100 miles an hour.
John Paul Jr., of course, who started the year out, and there is John Paul, or rather Al Unser Jr. Al Unser Jr., who was running in 4th position. He had managed to cling to the lead lap with the pace setter Mario Andretti, and Unser Jr. is in a position he has been so many times in his young career as an IndyCar driver, out of the race after running competitively near the top. Gary Lee is with Roger Penske, the man who manages the team and the cars for Al Unser Sr. and Rick Mears.
Roger, Rick has fallen out of the top 5. Is this strategy or is there a problem in the engine?
Well, no, I just talked to Rick and asked him. He just said he's backing off the pace. You know, we've got to finish this race with the points, and we know that the road racers are going to be a little stronger than we are, but there's a long way to go. I understand that little Al just dropped out there to us up the spot, so it's a long race to go, and we've got to finish.
So it's just a matter of conserving the point situation.
Well, it's a matter of running as fast as we can without getting into trouble, and that's what Rick's doing.
All right, nothing wrong with car number 6.
You know, people who aren't aware of IndyCar racing or perhaps professional automobile racing might think, well, it's easy to say that the son of a famous racing driver, talking Al Unser Jr., the man on your screen, oh, he's going to be a star someday. And there are those who might say, well, he's there only because of his dad. But I'll tell you, Chip, this guy is an incredible racing driver. We have seen him in ASA stock cars, raced against him in go-karts, seen him in Super Vs. Whenever he gets in a sprint car on dirt, he's right up at the front.
Well, you know, he's quite the man off the track also, Larry. During our accident at the Michigan 500, the medics rushed to him, they rushed to me, and the medics that were on me, I guess, apparently called for some help. Al Jr., his ankle only hurting, said, look, he said, go help Chip. Let's help him, get him, make sure he's okay. He brushed off any medical help so they could get with me, and I want to thank him for that.
Now there is Rick Mears, now running in 6th position. He's still in the lead lap, but I'll tell you, Mario is closing in on him. We're showing Rick now about 80 seconds behind Mario, and that's pushing close to a full lap here around Mid-Ohio. So Rick will be checking the mirrors with the radio. He probably has an idea that Andretti is closing in, and he may kick up the speed just a little bit. As you heard Roger Penske mention, he probably would like to stay on the lead lap, even though at this point they're kind of conceding the fact that if Andretti and Sullivan and Rahal finish, they're going to be difficult to beat. They probably would like to be in a position to be on the lead lap. Al Unser Jr., by the way, just to put a period on that story, he does have one victory this year, that win coming at Portland, an ESPN broadcast. He has led so many races in the past 2 seasons or run in the top 5, only to be without luck. And I'll tell you, if he ever starts having good luck, Katie bar the door, because that guy's going to be one tough customer. There is Rick Mears, a former champion, a 2-time winner of the Indianapolis 500. A man who qualified 2nd here today and perhaps would have liked to have run a little closer to the front, but the pace that the Lola contingent, and primarily the red Lola contingent of Andretti and Sullivan, have been setting for the past 2 months has just been incredible. So Rick and Roger Penske have made the decision to run their own race here today and hope for a good finish, as they are right up there in the point standings. Well, there is the main man. As we told you, the main man was beginning to reel in Rick Mears, and now Rick can not only see him, Chip, but he can hear him, he can smell him, and he can feel him. He's right there.
It's got to be a tough feeling for Rick to be getting a lap put on him. I can tell you there aren't many races we go to where Rick Mears gets a lap put on him this early in the race. Well, at the midway point especially.
Andretti not only going fast, but putting on a tremendous display of driving. Unless you've ever driven a Formula or an open wheel car on a road course, you just can't imagine how much work is going on. Let's watch Mario as he goes to work on Rick Mears. We'll pick up the explanation on driving in a second.
You know, I think what's interesting is we see Mears' car, the back end of his car seems to be oversteering a little bit. If you watch him through the S's here, he seems to be getting a little loose at the back of the car. That could be affecting his overall speed.
And really, in a race like this on a road course, when there are seldom any overall yellows, you're just about stuck with that unless you can get real lucky in a split second during pit stop, aren't you, Chip?
Exactly. Or if you have a pit stop where it's something easily you can change. A wing, sometimes they can do it on a normal pit stop, but you see Derek Daly oversteering there a little bit. And look at that tire mark on the side of his car.
I'll tell you, he's been close to somebody, hasn't he? And it wasn't one of his own crew, one of his own tires in the pit area. You saw Derek just wrestling that car. Looked like coming out of turn number 14, which is really not that sharp of a corner, just before he went into the carousel. But Derek Daly is doing well here. He qualified well up into the top 10 this week. Derek was 7th fastest on the grid during Friday's qualifying. He was the fastest, remember, on the full loads of fuel in yesterday afternoon session. And Daly right now runs in 5th position, and he's beginning to challenge Emerson Fittipaldi for 4th position. That's Fittipaldi in 4th and Derek Daly in 5th. Gary Lee?
Well, first, to address your comments about Derek Daly, he was very pumped up before this race, very optimistic, and he's not superstitious at all because he's wearing a green T-shirt. He said the car was handling well, he was doing what he had to do, and it should be a very good day for Pravimi Beal.
One of those guys whom you can identify by the helmet. It's black with a yellow arrow on the top, and it also has his birth sign, the Pisces, on the side of the helmet. So if you're ever wondering what car Derek Daly is in, just watch for the black helmet with the yellow arrow, and Daly has just moved up a position. Derek Daly, an expert road racer, has now moved to 4th position.
You know, he and Fittipaldi have driven with each other before in the Formula One series the past few years, and I had dinner with Emerson last night, and he was telling me about Derek, and he's driven with him before, so I'm sure this is not an unfamiliar sight for Emerson.
And the two of them, Chip, really point out the international flavor of IndyCar racing in 1984. 13 different states were represented, and Derek is off into the grass here on the front stretch. A tense moment, not only for Derek, but Emerson Fittipaldi. A momentary lapse of concentration. I'm guessing he was watching the pit board, Chip, as he came down the front stretch.
I would think, you know, here at Mid-Ohio, they have the pit boards on the opposite side of the track, which they don't have too often, and Derek went off on the outside of the track, but apparently didn't lose any time. He kept it together. I have to commend him. A fine piece of driving.
Can you imagine Fittipaldi's eyes? They must have been as big as saucers at that moment.
He probably almost came out of his helmet there, hoping to not see Derek come across in front of him.
I'm not sure, but I think I may have just seen Derek kind of give a wave to Emerson as they came down the backstretch. If indeed that's what happened, he was saying, Emerson, I'm sorry, I'll be better the next time around, I promise.
We'll keep an eye on him and see.
Derek Daly, the man who represents the country of Ireland. Emerson Fittipaldi, we mentioned earlier, from Brazil. 5 foreign countries in all were today's race, and there have been as many as 8 represented in individual IndyCar races in 1984, and apparently more in 1985. Chip, we've got to make mention, part of the news of the week was the new driver officially for 1985 behind the wheel of your car, at least up to this point, the red number 40.
No doubt about it. Emerson Fittipaldi is going to drive for Patrick next year in the number 40 car. Emerson has talked to me. I told him I wish him good luck driving with the team, and it looks like I'll be on to another team.
And Daly is in trouble. Derek Daly is coasting, coming down the front stretch. There is nowhere to hide. He's in a very narrow straightaway. He has passed the pit entrance. He'll try to coast to a grassy area. There is one coming up about 1/8 of a mile ahead of where he is now. But Derek Daly has problems. There you see him pulling off in a finger area that's right in the middle of the keyhole, if you will. He finds himself a dirt road and pulls behind a wall.
I think he's cutting the track, Larry. I think he's going to cut the track and get back on it. I think he took a shortcut.
Well, Chip, I don't know about that, but that's a ruling that will have to be made. As long as he doesn't improve his position, I think at this point he's hoping to be able to coast all the way around and get back to the pit area. But I believe that as long as you don't improve your position by shortcutting the racetrack, you're not going to be penalized. But the 31-year-old driver, he's got power, Chip. He's definitely got power. He couldn't coast that far, particularly uphill.
I'm sure that's going to give Emerson Fittipaldi quite a sight if he hasn't gone around him already.
That's a good
Come around and see Derek again in front of him.
Reminds me of Wilbur Shaw about 40 years ago at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. In his rookie year, he went over the wall, and most of the other drivers thought that he had been killed or at least mortally wounded. And about 8 laps later, he got in the team car, and as other drivers saw him, they were pulling in thinking he had seen a ghost. Derek Daly will be trying to make repairs on the Provimiville March. Mario Andretti continues to lead the race with Ray Hall running in second position.
We are back at Mid-Ohio in the pit area of the Provimiville number 16. Derek Daly, his Irish eyes are not smiling right now. He has indicated to the crew there is a problem with the gear shift linkage. They topped off the fuel in the car. Right now they're going to work on the shifter, trying to get this number 16 back in the race.
We have been all green so far here at the Escort. Radar warning 200. There is Al Unser Jr., one of the drivers out of the race. He dropped out on lap 43 with an engine problem. Here are the others: Chassis, Ferguson, Morton, Corrado Fabi, Dick Simon, Jeff Brabham, and Peter Kuhn running in his first race. And by the way, happy birthday, Mom Kuhn. This was Peter Kuhn's mom's birthday, and I'm sure she's sad that her son dropped out, but he made it, Mom. He made his first IndyCar race ever in his career, and I guarantee you had a good weekend. Al Unser Sr., or rather Al Unser Jr., there you see him again, reconfirmation on him being out of the race. There is Roberto Guerrero. Roberto runs in 8th position in the Master Mechanic number 9. This is a car that has undergone some changes in terms of team personnel over the last month. Guerrero has been very fast from time to time. In the 1984 season, he had a tremendous performance at the Indianapolis 500 this year when he finished second. And right now, Roberto runs in 8th position.
He does, Larry, and I'll tell you, we're on working lap 53 here. You know, it might be time for Mario Andretti to come back in the pits soon again. He was in on lap 25. When he does come in, we'll get a good indication of what kind of mileage Mario is getting on his second stop. What the teams do, they calculate their mileage by how much fuel they have to put in on the first stop. They can tell what mileage exactly they're getting by how much goes in the car.
Chip, having stopped at lap 25, I think he's got to go at least to lap 55 to be able to make the distance, unless they've got some real trick mileage situation going on. I think he's got to go to lap 55 or 56.
I'll tell you, the next few laps will tell the story.
Well, we've completed 53. We expected most of the drivers to pit around lap number 60, maybe lap 58 to 60. Guerrero now slowing as he comes into the pit area. Roberto Guerrero coming in for his second pit stop. He'll need fuel. They'll check the tires to see what to wear, although these radial Goodyear tires have been wearing quite well. Now Roberto asking for a conversation. Roberto Guerrero signaling to his crew members. Phil Casey, the man heading up this crew now. George Bignati standing in the wings. In an advisory capacity now, the man who started out as the chief mechanic on this crew when the year began. 54 laps now down as Emerson Fittipaldi in 4th position. He also makes a pit stop. The clock in the upper right-hand corner of your screen is for Guerrero, 25.3 tenths, and that's about 10 seconds slower than most of the other front runners have been stopping, but Guerrero is not necessarily in the hunt right now for victory. There is Emerson Fittipaldi. Boy, remember that bright pink race car and pink driving suit he had at Indianapolis? Well, Chippy told me this weekend that it's definitely permanently retired, but I noticed he's still got that Spider-Man helmet. It's a real deep metallic blue with bright orange trim.
He seems to be playing with his helmet right there. Must have some sort of problem with it. I think it's interesting to note that Fittipaldi took on 3 new tires that stop. Not 4, not 2. An interesting tactic here at this point in the race.
Well, we are anticipating the stops of our main drivers as we look at Emerson Fittipaldi going down the backstretch, the fastest place on this racetrack. What about it, Chip Ganassi, the backstretch?
As you exit the tricky keyhole section of the circuit, you enter the back straightaway. It's a very fast downhill straightaway with a kink in the middle of it. You exit the keyhole in approximately 3rd gear. You're up into 4th and 5th before you even get to the kink in the straightaway. By the time you're at the kink, you're approaching 175 to 180 miles an hour. After the kink, the car drifts back over to the left side of the circuit, and at that point you look for a break in the asphalt, which indicates you'll have to be braking and downshifting for the next right-hand turn.
Chip, I would imagine the first couple of times you go down that backstretch and go into madness, it must be a thrill.
It is quite a thrill, Larry. I can relate a situation one time in 1978. I was here in a Formula Ford and I went down the end of the back straightaway there and was racing with a man. I locked up my wheels underneath him and I slid straight into the woods there. So we don't want to see that happen to anyone today.
It wasn't even enough that the banking could catch you there, eh?
Not enough.
Well, Mario Andretti continues to turn in an average speed better than 2/3 of this field qualified at for this race. Andretti has been smooth. He's been fast. The race car has been flawless. That's one section of the racetrack right there underneath the Budweiser Bridge. We've seen Mario drop the right side tires off a couple of times, and at first I thought it was a mistake, and now I'm convinced that's his line. That's where he wants to be.
Apparently that car is working very well over the bumps. If he can afford to drive over the speed bumps like that, his shocks, they're doing a good job, and it doesn't seem to upset the attitude of the car. Believe me, it's not like Mario to drive over something like that if he doesn't have to, or if he doesn't want to.
Now there is the leader, Andretti, through the chicane, setting up again turn 3. The beginning of the keyhole. You hunker the car down low on the inside of the racetrack. And then up to turn 4 as you come out of the keyhole. We now have a report from the pit area that the number 16 car of Derek Daly, the engine has finally been shut off. They are unable to engage the gears, so there are more problems in the Provimi Veal pit. And Derek Daly, whose first victory, I believe, is imminent, looks like will not come today. There is Rick Mears, one of our leaders. Mears runs in 4th position, 1 lap down to the leader, and not only refueling the race car, but some cool water being poured into the cockpit.
I'll tell you, Larry, it must be very hot out there for them to be pouring water on Mears. It looks like he's apparently stalled it.
Rick Mears has stalled the car, exiting the pit area, and this will cost him dearly. He was racing on the track with Emerson Fittipaldi, Michael Andretti, and Howdy Holmes. All of those drivers were 1 lap down and within 20 seconds. And now Danny Sullivan, the 3rd running car, comes into the pits. You see Danny going by Rick, and they're having a hard time getting the Pennzoil Z7 Special refired.
Could mean trouble here, Larry. I saw Mario get the inboard on his last lap. We might see him coming in, and he is entering the pits. Here comes Mario.
Andretti charging in the pit area. There you see him at the top, now the middle of the screen, coming in behind Al Hobart. It is lap number 57, so we guessed he had to go at least 55, maybe 56. I think they got it, Chip. I think they're getting the fuel consumption that they need. He stopped on lap 25. He has gone 32 laps. Is that right? He's gone 32 laps since stopping.
32 laps, Larry, and that will for sure get him. 32 and 57 is well over 84 laps. I think he'll be able to go the distance.
Tremendous gas mileage. Make that methanol alcohol mileage for Mario Andretti as he drag strips out of the course. Ray Hall takes the lead, but it's only temporary. Ray Hall will have to stop. So Andretti and Sullivan have made their final pit stops. Gary Lee?
That time, as we had said earlier, Andretti never wanted something to drink, but apparently this time he's getting hot in the cockpit. He said, have something ready for me to drink. He came in, he took the liquid refreshment. They changed 4 tires this time. They asked him if he wanted a change of the chassis or the front wings. He said no, everything was fine, and he's back out on the racetrack.
Andretti out on the course. Ray Hall will be making his final pit stop momentarily. Can Andretti hold on to this tremendous pace which he has set so far? Mario Andretti coming to the pits there. That happened moments ago, but he's the leader. We've had our second incident involving fire. You're looking at Michael Andretti scurrying out of the cockpit, the water bottle in hand, Chip. He's got a fire.
Very dangerous situation, Larry. I'm sure most of the drivers would rather go off the track than experience a fire in the pits.
Well, both kart officials and crew officials from the Krakow people getting a dousing of water on Michael. If there was a fire on the uniform, it was put out almost immediately. There is Michael taking a drink of water. He's the one without the helmet. The other helmeted individuals are crew members of the Krakow Electrolux team. Bobby Rahal, the leader, is in the pit area. This is a routine pit stop. There you see Bobby live now. Bobby Rahal making his final pit stop. He'd like to be able to catch Mario Andretti and Danny Sullivan, but at this moment it's beginning to look bleak. There's Michael Andretti turning around saying, I'm all right, I'm all right. Hi, everybody back in Nazareth, PA, and all my old friends back in Super B's. We're out of the race. I'm disappointed, but I'm okay. Now, in addition to Michael, here is a list of others out of the race. Steve Chassie in one of the stock blocks. Dick Ferguson, another stock block. John Morton, Corrado Fabi, didn't last very long in his American debut. Dick Simon, the other victim of fire. Jeff Brabham, who's done so well on the road courses this year, and Peter Kuhn, who was in also his maiden voyage behind the wheel of an Indianapolis car. Al Unser Jr. dropping on lap 43, Derek Daly on lap 49, and the most recent retiree, Michael Andretti. It continues to be Mario Andretti. Can he be beaten?
The excitement has started to die down here in the Michael Andretti pit. In retrospect, Michael, what happened?
It just caught a fire, and it started to get to me, so I had to jump out of the car and put it out.
You're okay?
Yeah, no problem.
Car apparently was not damaged.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't even look at it yet.
Most importantly, Michael Andretti is okay.
Michael Andretti, I tell you, there's definitely an Andretti in those jeans, isn't there? There's a lot of Mario in the way he reacts, responds to situations. I have a feeling he's probably going to be around a couple years, don't you think, Chip?
He sure will be, Larry. And I think it's also one of the first times in this season that we've seen both of the Craco Wolf Systems cars out of the race. They've had a very good record for running a two-car team all season, and I'm surprised to see both cars out of the race.
Oh, they really have. They've been strong on both the types of racetracks, the ovals as well as the road courses. Maybe a little stronger on the road courses. Howdy Holmes, there he is coming at you, going into the keyhole, the white 84 March with the blue trim, the Jiffy Mixes car, the number 41 car of Howdy Holmes' teammate to Tom Sneva. Howdy's having a right respectable day. He's only lost one lap to the leader, Mario Andretti, and I'll tell you, that's saying a lot today here at Mid-Ohio because Andretti has just, in a word, been fast. Howdy Holmes right now runs in 7th position. He's one lap down to the leader, as we mentioned, and really running close to both Rick Mears and the number 4 car of Tom Sneva. Those guys are in contention for 5th, 6th, and 7th.
You know, Howdy had a rough year last year driving for Doug Shearson, and I think he redeemed himself when he showed he can qualify very well anyway. He was on the front row at Indianapolis, qualified 2nd next to his teammate Tom Sneva at Indy this year. And we look to see Howdy's back on the rebound again, I can tell you.
Well, his best road, and look at here, another disappointment among our potential front runners, Roberto Guerrero, who was running in 9th, or make that 10th position at this point. He had been in 8th through 12th throughout the entirety of the race. Roberto Guerrero is going back behind the wall. Problems in the Master Mechanic number 9 car. Guerrero, who has been so strong, particularly on the road courses this year, another one of the international and exciting rookies in IndyCar racing, will have to wait also for another day.
I'll tell you, Guerrero, I don't think we've seen the last of him before the season is out here. We're going to see something good out of Guerrero in his Browning Master Mechanic car. He's been very, very fast, Larry, a lot this year. He's very fast at Long Beach, very fast at Indianapolis, of course. Where he's had problems, he's always been running at the front. This is one of the few weekends he hasn't been running at the front all season.
There's Howdy again. You know, Chip, Howdy has been surprisingly fast on the ovals this year. Most of his early racing background is on road courses, but on all the oval races, or in all the oval races this year, he's qualified in the top 10 every time.
I think the other important thing to point out is Tom Sneva's done well on the road courses. It shows a lot of teamwork. Sneva apparently helping Howdy on the oval tracks, Howdy helping Tom Sneva in the Texaco Star on the road courses.
Yeah, his best finish has been a 2nd. I think that was at Phoenix earlier this year. The Teddy Mayer, Tyler Alexander team, a very experienced duo. As you see the leader, Andretti, going by Holmes, and Howdy's got to just be shaking his head and saying, well, there he goes again. Now I'm 2 laps down. I was going to try and set this one out, or at least get myself to the finish and get as good a finish as I possibly can. So as Andretti once again puts another lap onto Howdy Holmes continues to trail, but Howdy runs in 7th position. It's Andretti, Rahal, Sullivan, Fittipaldi, and Mears. Of course, you're looking at Rick Mears, a man who has won just about every race on the trail at one time or another, but it's unlikely that Rick will win today. We've got 20 laps to go, and he is one of 3 drivers who is 1 lap down to the leader. The 3 drivers 1 lap down are Emerson Fittipaldi, Rick Mears, and the number 4 car of Tom Sneva. The 3 drivers on the lead lap in 3rd position, Danny Sullivan. It's, guess what, a Lola. The number 5 car in his home track, Bobby Rahal. And if you've been watching and you don't know who the leader is, you just haven't been paying attention.
It's Mario Andretti. And I'll tell you one thing, Larry, this reminds me of Cleveland. You had 3 cars pull out and put an extensive lead on the rest of the field. Although I finished 2nd in that race, I was a lap and 3/4 down.
Well, there is the third running number 30, the Domino's Pizza Hot One of Danny Sullivan, fielded by Doug Shearson. They started the year out with the DSR. It was a chassis that the team wanted to put together and put on the racetrack on its own, but it just didn't work. They were standing in the right place at the right time in the line of people wanting chassis. They were able to get a Lola that was just before the running of this year's Indianapolis 500. It was obvious that the Lola was going to be very fast from the moment, and Danny way out of shape coming out of that downhill corner. You saw him dirt tracking it, but he gathered it up, and I'm sure with the hot, slippery conditions we have here today, that's happened more times than just the laps that we have seen it. But from the moment they put this Lola on the racetrack, it has been very fast. Gary Lee is in the pit area and has this comment.
Well, Larry, part of the drama at any racetrack is played out in the pit area. We're here with Roberto Guerrero, his wife, Katie, and obviously you're totally worn out at this point. What was the problem with car number 9?
Well, I don't really know. The rear end was just bouncing. I don't know if there was a broken shock absorber or something. You know, just my head just kept hitting against the thing, and at the end, you know, I was making so many mistakes that I just decided to stop.
Obviously, it was the physical abuse that you were taking that forced you to stop.
Yes, I guess, you know, whether there was something wrong with the car or not, I don't know, but I was just that. I mean, I've been doing all the talking of how fit I am, and then I go out of a race like this, so I don't know, we'll find out.
You're okay now?
Yeah, I feel okay.
Well, as we come down to the final stages of today's race, there were a couple of people who were here who were non-qualifiers. We certainly want to cite their effort. Steve Hostetler was here in his own Esteban-sponsored Mexican food restaurant place. That's what Esteban's is, but Steve Hostetler did not make the field. Chet Phillip was also here. He crashed in practice on Friday and did try to work up the speed yesterday, Saturday, but was unsuccessful in doing so. There were a lot of other active drivers who were in the pit area or here at the grounds who did not participate in practice or qualifying. Johnny Rutherford, we mentioned Teo Fabi. Phil Kruger was a mechanic on the Hostetler car, and the guy sitting next to me, Chip Ganassi. Chip, is there an estimate as to when you might be back?
Well, hopefully, right now I'm working on the last 3 races of the season: Phoenix, Laguna Seca, and Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. By the report, but the doctor says I'm 99% recovered, and they just don't want to let me go back until I'm 100%.
A lot of talk about the dominance of the Lola race car. We asked Rick Mears earlier this week if that was the direction the Penske team was going to go in 1985, and certainly nothing is certain at this juncture in any racing season. Just ask Chip Ganassi about rides, but at any rate, nothing is certain. But one thing that Rick did say is that they have their 1985 marches on order. So the Penske team, at least at this moment, is thinking March for 1985. The Lola people indicate that maybe they won't sell the cars in the wholesale fashion that the March factory has. They may be looking at only 5 or 6 teams and maybe as few as 12 Lolas being rolled out of the shops, at least the distribution shops of Carl Haas's up in suburban Chicago. Andretti has set a blistering pace here all day. Again, we're looking at Rick Mears, who runs in 5th position. Andretti's pace is so fast that he is beginning to close in on the 3rd running. There is the 2nd place car, Bobby Rahal. Andretti is beginning to move in on the 3rd running, Danny Sullivan. Gary Lee right now is with the team owner and manager of Bobby Rahal and the man who is the proprietor of this racetrack, Jim Truman.
We always enjoy coming to Mid-Ohio, a beautiful facility. Right now you've got the wick cranked up. What's the strategy?
We don't have any left. Bobby's driving as fast as he qualified, and missing some time yesterday in the rain. I think we're just a little bit slower than we could have been. But Mario's got about a 15-second lead on us, and he's trying like whatever to catch up.
Obviously, all season long, the Marches have been chasing the Lolas. What's on the drawing board for True Sports next year? Another March or perhaps a Lola?
Well, we feel we have a March that's, we've changed it enough that we know the car is, at many racetracks, just as good as the Lola. We're going to stay with March for next year.
So keep the boost cranked up. Good luck.
It's all the way.
Jim Truman.
Bobby Rahal flat out trying to catch the high-flying Mario Andretti. We have completed 69 of 84 laps, 15 laps to go, and Rahal really has his work cut out for him.
A hot, humid afternoon here at Mid-Ohio. One of the drivers now a spectator is Unser Jr. Before we talk about what prompted your departure, just exactly how warm is it in the cockpit?
It's pretty hot out there. I don't know I wouldn't say it's the hottest or anything like that, but it is hot out there, and I can see a couple guys with their shields up out there and trying to get some air to them.
And why now are we talking to you and not watching you on the race course?
Well, I came off of turn 4, I believe it is, and onto the long backstretch back there, and the car just started backfiring and missing, and then pretty soon it just quit running, and that was it.
Now you can stand and watch your dad, and I understand now he's in the pit area.
Yeah, I want him to go.
One answer out, one answer still in the race.
Well, Unser Sr. curiously making a pit stop here on lap number 71. All the leaders had made their routine pit stops between lap 55 and 60, but Sr. makes a quick duck into the pits. Maybe he was checking on Junior. I don't know, Chip, but that was an unusual time to stop, and they didn't spend very much time there. From my location, I couldn't tell exactly what they did.
I think it's interesting to point out that Al Sr. is running in 8th place at the moment, according to CART, and we saw him off the track earlier. He's doing a heck of a job out there.
He really has rebounded from that brief rest that he had in the grass. You know, Al Sr. has been one of the focus of attention this week here at Mid-Ohio. All of us got together for a roast with Al Unser Sr. a couple of nights ago, and Gary Lee talked with Sr. about Junior and Sr.
This is about the time of the year when we start hearing rumors. And 2 years ago, we said, Al, is it true you're going to Penske? And Al said, well, I don't know. And I said, you're a free agent? He said, yeah, I'm going to be a free agent, but I don't know exactly where I'm going. Now there's an interesting rumor that I'd like for you to comment about, and that is that an Al Unser Jr. might be replacing Al Unser Sr. in the Penske camp for 85. Would you address that rumor?
I've heard it.
We've heard rumor that you're going to Formula One, to this team or to that team. And one great rumor we've heard, and I just asked your dad about it, was that Al Jr. was replacing Al Sr. in the Penske camp. Now, what do you know about that?
Oh, I don't know.
Rick Gallis is a supercar owner, and he puts everything that I've ever asked for, and so I kind of enjoy the rumors.
My favorite line from the roast the other night, Chip, was Al Jr. stood up and says, you know, I love my dad a lot. I would never do anything to him. I would never take a ride from him unless the price was right.
Unless the price was right is what he said. And I'll tell you what's interesting about both of their interviews. I didn't hear either one of them say no, Larry.
You know, that's true. Good point, Chip. And I've always thought that racing drivers, once they retire, would make great politicians, because you all become masters of the non-answer answer, you know?
We saw two masters right there.
Yeah, I'll tell you, two masters maybe of conversation, but also behind the wheel. Al Unser Sr., the only man to win the Triple Crown, all 3 500s in 1 year, a 3-time winner of the Indianapolis 500, and I would go on record predicting that Al Unser Jr. will win the Indianapolis 500 someday in the future. There's a man who's won the Indianapolis 500, and a lot of people thought that he might win 4, 5, or 6 of them, but Lady Luck has just not been on his side. But he does have one of those victories within his many laurels behind the wheel of a race car. But he has done something that only one other driver racing here at Mid-Ohio this weekend has done, and that is become a World Formula One driving champion. Truly a remarkable achievement for any man in his racing career.
You know, Larry, when I first came into IndyCar racing, Mario was very, very helpful to me. He kind of took me under his wing and showed me around at the Speedway in 1982. And I was driving back the car that he drove in 1981 in Indianapolis for a team by the name of Jack Rhodes. And I'll tell you, I have a soft spot in my heart all the time for Mario.
Mario Andretti, a classy man on the racetrack and a classy man off the racetrack. Our Gary Lee is in the pits, and he has a comment on strategy. Gary?
Right now, the strategy for both first and second place is very simple. The boost is turned up as far as it will go. They're very happy, both Andretti and Rahal, with fuel consumption. They feel confident they can keep the boost cranked up and go the distance without running out of fuel.
Chip, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm looking at the pit stop charts. Emerson Fittipaldi, who right now runs in 4th position, stopped on lap 53. They really haven't shown the ability to go more than 26 laps. He's going to fall short. I think Fittipaldi is going to have to come in. We'll watch for that, and that could shuffle the standings in the top 5, because right now it is Andretti. They're the leader, with Bobby Rahal 24 seconds back. Then 1 lap down, Danny Sullivan, Emerson Fittipaldi, Rick Mears, Howdy Holmes, and Tom Sneva in that order.
Very, very interesting down at the end here. You know,
like I said, it just reminds me of Cleveland here. You've had one or two fellas, and they've lapped the entire field. That's really a feat.
Well, maybe the slowest car in the race is Dale Coyne, but you know something? He got in the race, and he's doing what a lot of people only talk about or maybe dream about, and that is getting into an IndyCar race. This is Dale Coyne. This is a 1982 Eagle with a Chevy. He's working from two extreme disadvantages. You can see Dale signaling to Howdy Holmes, giving plenty of room. He knows exactly what his position is in the race, and Dale Coyne is making sure that he does not disrupt anybody else's progress. Less than 10 laps to go now. 75 of 84 laps have been completed as we continue to monitor the progress of the Plainfield, Illinois driver Dale Coyne, who started this race from row number 13. He qualified at 93 miles per hour average speed around this 2.4 mile course, and that compares to the 105 mile per hour average that Mario Andretti had. Andretti, remember, however, was 2 1/2 miles per hour faster than the entire field. There's Dale Coyne getting into an IndyCar race. Andretti was so much faster than everybody, they were all shaking their heads after Thursday's practice session. Mario Andretti has been fast since Thursday morning throughout Friday, Saturday, and certainly today. Bobby Rahal today has been the only man who seems to be even within reach of at least pretending to the throne of Andretti for today.
I'll tell you, 25 seconds back is Rahal in second place, and it's going to take a miracle for him to win the race. Although we did see a similar miracle at Cleveland when Bobby Rahal was out in the lead by a wide margin, and he fell out, and the win went to Danny Sullivan. We might see something similar today. That's what it's going to take when you're that far back.
And not only is Rahal, Chip, about 25 seconds behind, there's Rahal getting ready to put a lap on the third running Danny Sullivan. So Bobby Rahal has just, you know, we should have put money on this race. We said Andretti and Rahal before it went. But Rahal is having a great day, too. And can you imagine lapping the third place car and still not winning the race?
I'll tell you, I don't think Rahal will be too sad about second place today.
Bobby Rahal there in the white, red, and blue trim number 5. Danny Sullivan there in the red, white, and blue Domino's Pizza, the number 30-minute car, hot one. Danny Sullivan, the driver out of Louisville, Kentucky, who runs in third place with Formula One experience. 2 times this year he has graced victory lane in that Team Scherson Lola. Sullivan, I don't know if he moved over or what, but I suggested perhaps he may have, knowing that Bobby was coming and knowing how late in the race we were. Rahal continues to motor in second place, but boy, I tell you, it is Mount Everest that he has to climb if he wants to catch Andretti. Incidentally, Chip, as we talk about Sullivan, as we watch Bobby Rahal, where those Lolas might be going next year, here seems to be the inside line on those 10 or 12 Lolas that will go out. Obviously, Newman and Haas will have one for Andretti and whatever. Team Scherson will probably have a renewal. Team Forsythe was the third team. They are already active with a Lola. Team BDS may get 3, and one of those might go to Chet Phillip. Wouldn't that be an interesting situation? Crakel is also apparently on the list, as is maybe the Primus racing team.
What's interesting, Larry, is the fact that Lola is not quite the factory that March is. I think I've heard rumors that Lola can only build 15 or 16 cars.
There's Josele Garza. Boy, he's had a tough day. Josele has been in the pits on a number of occasions. Right now, Josele is listed in 11th position. He's lost 7 laps. He's been competitive when he's been on the racetrack. We still have about 13 cars on the track. Pete Halsmer is running last among those 13 left, but remember, Pete also lost a considerable amount of time in the pits earlier when he had some spark and ignition problems. Gordy Johncock continues to race. Scott Brayton looks like he's going to survive another race, and John Paul Jr.
You know, we see Garza here. It's a very hot day, obviously, but, you know, he takes that Schaefer name into off-road racing, does some off-road racing in the truck, in a Ford truck of some sort. I know he does some off-road racing. He ought to be used to this heat, Larry.
Yeah, and he's done very well. He wins races in that off-road stuff. He's also been running Mickey Thompson's indoor series. He's very good at that type of racing. His best finish on the road course this year so far has been 7th. And there's a familiar name, Gordy Johncock in the STP Dayglow Orange. And Johncock, or is that Petty, or is that Patrick light blue? Which is it?
I'll tell you, from the STP people, they say it's Petty blue.
Yeah.
When you talk to Patrick, he says it's Patrick blue.
And you talk to Gordy Johncock, and he says
STP blue.
Oh, he said STP blue. That's a new angle to it. Whatever the case, Gordy Johncock has used a powder baby blue helmet long before he got this ride, and it's kind of become the unofficial color scheme of the Patrick Racing Team, this light blue, and it's been very convenient for his sponsor STP because it happens to make the car look very reminiscent of Richard Petty's car. By the way, speaking about Richard Petty, in the little town where we spent the weekend at the hotel, the sheriff there was Richard H. Petty. How about that?
The interesting thing there, you know, we've seen STP for years on the Johncock car and on the Petty car. You wonder sometime where racing would be without someone like a STP.
Gordy Johncock right now running in 10th position. He's lost 3 laps to the leader Mario Andretti, but then again, who hasn't? Johncock has had a rough weekend here. They've lost 2 engines. They lost an engine in an overheating oversight earlier this week, and then they just flat lost one at speed yesterday. He's number 4 in miles completed. As we go back up front looking at Mario Andretti, Gordy Johncock is number 4 in miles completed. So in the category of perseverance, Gordy Johncock is ranked at least 4th, but consider the fact he hadn't won yet. That's a lot of guts.
That is a lot of guts, Larry. You know, at Long Beach, he drove over 3/4 of the race with only 1 gear in the car, and they'll tell you that takes some tenacity.
You recognize this guy? He runs Trans Am, I think, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. I think he's done some work on TV also.
Yeah, but the verdict is out still on his driving. Now, obviously, we're talking about Paul Newman, in case some of you men out there in the crowd didn't recognize him. Obviously, all the ladies have probably just swooned and hit the living room floor or maybe the patio. By the way, we hope that you're having an opportunity to watch this race from a nice, comfortable position. This is an awful nice day here in the rolling hills of north central Ohio, and I hope it's a nice day wherever you are this holiday weekend. You know, the drivers were suggesting that the track was much more slippery this year. There was sealant that was put on as Andretti goes around. Johncock put on it since the last time when they were here, and they called it an ice skating rink, but we haven't seen much evidence of that out there today, Chip. The drivers have been handling it very well, and I'm also told that whereas last year a lot of the corners were 3rd and 4th gear, this year they're 2nd and 3rd gears. They had to gear down.
Without a doubt, what they've done, although the track is not, we saw last year the track was breaking up too, and in many parts of the circuit it was 1 lane going through. I can attest to that. I was here. But now the track has seemed to stay together all day, although they probably, because of the slippery situation, had to gear down. It's important to point out that for as much as it hinders Mario Andretti, it hinders the man in last place also. So it's kind of relative throughout the whole field what it does to you.
Andretti will be looking for the white flag the next time around. Earlier in the broadcast, we mentioned Kevin Cogan, and there are some others who are laid up and no doubt watching. We want to let them know that we're looking forward to their return to the IndyCar circuit. Michael Chandler, Jacques Villeneuve, Rich Vogler injured in a sprint car accident about a week ago at the Terre Haute Action Track. And a very close friend of ours, Jeff Knuckles, injured in a midget crash about 2 weeks ago, convalescing in nearby Columbus, Ohio. And of course, Jim Gardner from the Dygard Racing Team down in the Deep South had a heart attack a few weeks back. And we understand that Jim is getting along fine. We know all those people watch, and we want all of you to know that we miss you and look forward to your return to the speedways.
You know, Larry, I talked to Kevin Cogan the other day, and we might see him back here sooner than most people think. I'll tell you, I look forward to having him around. He's a good driver.
Here comes Andretti out of the carousel, uphill to the front stretch, the start-finish line. Well, not quite out of the carousel, yes. I guess I pushed him around a little too soon. Turns 15, turns 16. The road on the right is the entrance to the pits, uphill. Here's the start-finish line, the white flag from Nick Finoro as Andretti begins his last lap here at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. He is looking for victory in the Escort Radar Warning 200. The pit crew, you can see Darryl Salvi, the crew chief. Boy, they're really uptight about this one, aren't they? Boy, when things go well, after you've worked all year or all month or all week, it's a good feeling.
You know, it's about this time in the car that Mario Andretti, I'm sure, is hearing little noises and wondering, he's just got 1 lap to go, and I'm sure that he's hearing all the little innuendos and noises in the car.
Does that really happen?
I'll tell you, Larry, it happens.
You think a guy like Mario, with all those wins, he's won in sprint cars, he's won in dirt cars, winner of the Hoosier 100, he's won races at the high-banked half-mile dirt at Eldora, Grand Prix, Formula 1 wins, he's won in midgets, all those years of experience, stock cars, he won the Daytona 500. You think they'd go away?
You would think it, but I know Mario can tell you, he still hears them each and every time around the track, and it's interesting because
it's important also to drive just as hard on the last lap as you have all other 83 laps, because if you start to slow down, you might make a mistake then. That's what you have to be careful of. Stay in your rhythm.
You can see the great support that this Nazareth, Pennsylvania driver, originally out of Trieste, Italy, long time ago, he and the family migrated to Nazareth, Pennsylvania, and the people here in Ohio and Central Ohio are supporting this man. Checkered flag out, and Andretti and the Lola have won again, the 6th win in a row for the Lola chassis, and the 7th in the last 8 races, and Andretti leads the league with 5 victories.